I'd love to share, your information and your message with, the listeners of the podcast. So I'd love to hear sort of your journey from where you began, you kind of to where you are, and then from where you are to kind of what you're doing. You wrote a book, and what are all the good things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis?
Absolutely. So my journey started a long time ago, especially if we are talking about discovering mental health issues. That was almost, nearly 30 years ago, I would say. And since about 20 years ago, I've been a researcher. So I decided to find a way out by myself. I wasn't satisfied with what society has to say in that regard. And I'm not trying to discount other people's work. I'm just saying that there are different ways to the top of the mountain, as they say. And so for me, particularly, my mind works in a different way of analysis from many people. Like I can think of different solutions, and I have this propensity, I would say, to look at things from a different perspective than most people. And so because of that, I believe that the very standard, like one size fits all approaches didn't really resonate with me. So long story short, I became a spiritual mentor and a teacher about 20 years ago. And so I started sharing what I've discovered through my research, and I'm pretty good at piecing information together and testing it. Like someone said, oh, you test the hell out of things, and I do. And so I've discovered that not just, the spiritual heritage of humankind is very valid, but it's also really important for us right now in this very turbulent and very challenging times. But another thing is that many of those tools and techniques and strategies that people were using over the centuries had a one fundamental flaw. It was that they were created many years ago and they were designed for a very different mindset in a very different cultural background. And so, it's a bit like with food. So you can have some amazing food, but it's no good if it disagrees with you personally. Like your body doesn't like it. It doesn't matter how fresh and how tasty, how amazing that food is. And so with spiritual learnings, it's actually very similar. And what I did, I found those fundamental underlying principles that made those things work. And then I redesigned them in a way that would fit our current needs in our Western society. So it is a system for the Westerners, and also it's a system specifically designed for the male mind. Because again, from what I discovered, many of those spiritual approaches that help people, even meditation and mindfulness, something as fundamental as that, the way they're being taught is primarily aligned with the female mind. And if someone is in that polarity, they will undoubtedly find it very empowering and very helpful. But for the male mind, I've noticed that it doesn't really produce results in most cases. And in some cases, it actually damages those people on those deep spiritual level. So I embarked on this journey to put things right and to help those guys who need to hear my message at the right time.
Oh, excellent. Well, I imagine, again, this is great stuff, but what are your thoughts? It feels like there's been a tremendous shift in the very recent, last few years on even discussing mental health and even talking about it publicly, sharing information. And I guess, and I'm obviously biased, right, being a male, but it feels like, and I have no scientific research data on this, but it also feels like males in particular are much more transparent and open to, yeah, I'm having some challenges. And here's what I'm doing about it, and seeking help and coaches like yourself. What do you think? Have you seen
Right.
that shift?
Yes, I've seen the shift for sure. And I think that has to do with the fact that it's just a sheer necessity. Because since I would say mid 20th century, this is when, for example, speaking about the UK, the National Happiness Index is
Right.
the thing that measures the nation's emotional well-being. And so it was the highest in the 1950s. And since then, it's been gradually dropping. And so obviously, the more distress people feel and the more they are feeling overwhelmed, the more there is a ground for developing certain mental challenges. And so inevitably, it crossed a threshold where you just couldn't keep it under the carpet. It was just too much. So I believe that people started talking to it simply because they just could not keep silent about it any longer because the phenomenon became so widespread and so right in your face. So you have to, and especially for men in business because they're natural and professional problem solvers.
Right.
And so if you have a problem, then you feel compelled to do something about it. I'm like that as well. If someone even shares with me some struggle that they're going through, my brain instantly starts thinking of solutions for them.
Right.
And sometimes, obviously, I don't share it with them because there are situations where people don't want answers. They just want discomfort of talking to someone. So they don't want to hear some action plans. But my brain just comes instantly, devises some action plan. And so for men, it's a natural tendency to try and fix things.
Yep.
I mean, for the majority. So I would say this has been a big contributing factor to it. But at the same time, men don't like talking about social issues, mental health issues, because it makes them appear less than.
And weak,
And
right? Right.
yes,
That's what
exactly.
we've been told all our lives, right? Be strong,
Yeah,
be
boys
the
don't cry.
leader, right? Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And so most men like naturally, and I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily. It all depends how you handle it. But most men in general like being self-sufficient, and they don't like being a crybaby, going around asking everyone to help and just basically drawing attention to themselves. It just doesn't feel nice, doesn't feel right. And I actually agree with that because it goes against the fundamental male principle of going forward and winning and conquering. And so, it's a very tricky place to find a balance because codependency is great, when you can share your stuff and people can share their stuff, absolutely. But it's very tricky not to cross that line where you literally it flips in your mind and you feel justified in being a victim. And I believe this is what our society, perhaps inadvertently, is doing to them. Because sometimes encouraging someone too much to go against what they feel right creates that conflict within them that actually puts them down even more.
That is fascinating. So I never thought about it that way. So you just caught me with that phrase, justifying being a victim, right? And that mindset shifting from, I'm having some mental health challenges, big bucket, we'll just call it that. That could be a million different things. And typically the male, we'll concentrate on that, would say, well, how do I fix that? How do I solve that? How do I move
Yes.
forward? But if that person gets to the point where they say, well, it's okay for me to feel this way. I'm okay. I should say, society says it's okay for me to feel this way. Then you get in this loop of feeling that way, but not fixing it. Is that what
Yes.
you mean? Wow.
Yes.
Okay. Interesting.
Absolutely. And it's very destructive for men on a very fundamental level.
Okay. Wow. So this is a great topic. I've had a couple folks on my podcast that we touched on kind of mental health issues, but this is like one level at least deeper, I just realized that, it's funny you mentioned a mountain before, reaching the top of the mountain. And I'm
Yeah,
talking to one of my friends who's also a coach, and he said, the male journey is to climb that mountain, right? To climb that mountain. And sometimes you get to the top and you go, this is it. Like,
yeah,
that's it. Like, I've got a great family. I've great got a job. I've got, good savings. And then you're like, this is it. And some men fall off the other edge of the mountain and,
yes.
drinking and, um, divorce and, all sorts of motorcycle, bad stuff. Although I had a motorcycle a long time ago. Um, and some go back down the mountain and find another mountain or find another reason to climb that mountain again. And
That's right. Yeah.
anyway, that's where I was. And I guess I am sort of still. And, kind of finding my way through that of basically, what is my purpose now? I'm, married with two children. I've raised them. They've now graduated from university. They're beginning to start their own lives. And now I'm like, well, now what? So I'm kind of on that journey as well.
All right. Yeah. Actually, that would be perfect for you personally then, because depression is intrinsically linked with living your purpose.
Right.
It's essentially a mechanism. It's like an error message from your mind saying that you're not where you should be.
Right.
And the problem that many people deal with is that level of their mind that sends that message doesn't communicate in words. It only communicates in feelings. So you may have this overwhelming sense of suffocating darkness and despair and dread and all those negative emotions, but can't really properly label them or put a finger on where they're coming from and why they're even there. And especially just like you described, for someone who on the surface has it all,
Right.
a good job, or running their own business, a nice house, an expensive car, or several, maybe even a yacht, all of that proves to
Success.
people, yeah, proves to
Right.
people that you've made it, that you have it all figured out. And then under that really shiny surface, that person is just crumbling and dying inside. And he can't explain it to himself, and he can't even go and talk to anyone properly because quite often the response is like, dude, you've made it, you've got it all, how dare you feeling
Right.
depressed? Like, what's, you can't, I can't even feel compassion to you right now because I'm in my dead end job and you're complaining about your perfect life. And I think that puts those people into an even worse position because, well, now you are not just feeling depressed, you're feeling guilty about
Right. Right. Exactly. It's actually like a whole nother layer of,
it.
well, I
Yes,
shouldn't feel this way. I feel guilty for feeling this way.
yes.
Exactly. It's like a whole nother weight on top of that darkness. Yeah.
Absolutely. So what I do essentially, I help people decode those error messages from their mind. And so when something like this pops up, they know how to read it. It's like there is an error code. So they know how to read it and they know what steps to take to solve and fix that issue. So essentially, at the end of the day, like the bottom line, that depression is trying to tell you that you're off track. It's like your sat nav saying, you're off track. You need to either U-turn or take the next turn right to
Right.
reroute. And it's basically it's like the wordless message saying reroute, reroute. And that happens to people who get successful a lot because from your soul standpoint, that inner core of you, having those attributes of success is not actually enough. So it wants you to become the person you were called to be. And while you're striving to achieve those material goods, you're kind of distracted, but at the same time, your soul sees it as a quest for greatness because that's what men really want. Like deep down, if you ask if you ask someone who understands the concept in words, like would you like to achieve your own personal greatness, they would say yes. If they don't understand the concept of greatness, they will try and describe it differently. But at the end of the day, it's stepping into your own personal power as an individual and as a man. And so once your soul sees that you have all those tools in the physical world, like money, influence, you know the right people, let's say you're connected with influencers, people in power, and your soul goes, right, now why are you sitting on this? You now need to take those tools that you've earned and start using them to get where you want to be, where you need to be as a person. And now, because in our society, we don't really have this kind of training of, okay, so how do you achieve your personal greatness? And the problem is, from my perspective, that I see loads of people, or say gurus, who advertise their work, their trainings using those words. But what they're really doing is they don't give those people the actual tools and techniques that they need. It's more like creating a yet another mask. So if you look into those trainings, for example, the majority of them will come down to, right, well, if you feel that there is something missing in you as a person, what you need to do, you need to find a role model, someone you admire, and then you just try to emulate whatever they have and make it yours. And, copy their tone of voice, copy their body language, and that will do it. And it's not the answer, because of course self-bettering is great, but ultimately what we need to understand, and not just know but understand, is that at the end of the day, the things that we see as ourselves, like the bodies and the world that we see around us, the physical reality, is not the entire thing. We are energy beings, spiritual beings, living this physical experience. And if we don't connect these two properly, this is where the problems are coming from. Because it's very similar to, imagine if you were somehow forced to live with your left arm and your left leg somehow disabled. Like you would have them, but let's say they would tied up, it would be tied up and you couldn't use them. Well, now imagine how that would impair your quality of life and how annoying and frustrating that would be, right? So you have a fully functional body, but you're only allowed to use one part of it. And now what? You can't really easily drive a car. You can't even carry shopping from a shop because, like, well, there is not much you can do if you only have one part of your body functioning. And so many people are trapped like that. So they have this true self, this true spiritual self to them, but they don't know how to use it. So they're only half of what they should be. And that half is obviously suffering because we're designed to be whole.
Right. So one of the challenges, so I totally agree with everything you just said. And the key part though is, so you talked about, the males or someone, building their whole life, gaining all of the, I'm going to call them tools, the people, money, connections, building their network, etc. But then your mind saying you're not using all of this for something great. One of the biggest challenges I find personally, as well as when I'm talking with others, is I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know, like I have this great life. I've done all these great things and I want to be great and I want to do something, but I don't know exactly what that is. How do you
Right.
get to that?
Oh, I love this. I love this question because it highlights a very common misconception. People see their purpose as something that they should do instead of something they should be.
Doing versus being. Okay.
Yes, there is a fundamental difference. So to do what you are destined to do, you need to become the person who can do those things first.
Okay.
And this is that missing link. Because if you try to think, okay, so what should I be doing to live my purpose? is the wrong question to ask. You should ask, what kind of person should I become to live my purpose? And it's very similar to that mountain analogy that we touched on earlier, because imagine it as a journey where you're climbing a mountain. And if you do that with a physical mountain, every time you climb, say, a few hundreds of meters, your view is going to change. And so if you're right at the bottom, you're going to see the trees. Maybe there is a creek, maybe there are some stones, but that's about it. And then if you climb up a bit higher, you will see, okay, so that's forest that stretches up to, say, another mountain. And then you climb up a bit higher, and then you see, oh, there was a village just over there, and I never knew it was there. This is because as you're climbing up, your view and your horizon is expanding, and it's very similar with spiritual matters. So to be able to see what it is you should be doing, you need to evolve to the stage where you're able to do that. Does it make sense?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. In a much smaller way, I tell and coach people with, I'm not sure where to go. And I say there's two things. One is, and it doesn't matter which order you do this, but one is um, take some action, any action, right? Don't get into analysis paralysis, but just take one
Yeah.
step forward, really for that same reason, because that one step may lead you to the right. But when you get there, you realize, oh, there's something else, right? So your path might be meandering. Most people think their path is linear, perfectly linear
Yes.
from point A to point B, and that can't be any
Never.
more untrue, right? And the other thing I try to say is, similar to you saying I want to climb to the top of the mountain, is just a goal, a goal. So you have a direction, but as you're going through the path, the goal changes because you're learning new things, you're observing new things, you're seeing new things, but you still have to have the start and the goal to just get moving. So similar, but my analogy is much smaller than yours, but it totally makes sense.
Right. Yeah. It's literally once you are, say, midway, you now see so much more, and in a physical reality, that gives you new points on your map, right? More
Right.
information, something
Right.
to analyze, and it's very similar. Where as you're developing yourself spiritually, your worldview expands and you become able to see and contemplate things that you haven't before. This is why when you are on top of, at the bottom of the mountain, you can't really see what you should be doing because you're not able to grasp it yet. You need to first become the person who is living a purpose, and then it's going to unfold naturally. Because again, this is something that most people don't understand, sadly. Your purpose is not some external activity like, say, just playing golf, for example, or driving a car. It's like, oh, what should I be doing today for my purpose? Your purpose is a natural extension of what you are. And so, being a person who is in a certain way, you will be naturally drawn to do certain things because of who you are, right? So, for example, let's say if you're a pilot, you fly planes. That's because you're a pilot. So you don't think about it. It's like, oh, what should I be doing today? I have no idea. No, you just fly planes because you're a pilot, right? And if you're say a gardener, this is what you do. You look after gardens and after plants. And so once you get that sense of self-identity, not your ego story, but your true self-identity, your life unfolds from there.
So on that analogy, the pilot and the gardener, um, I'm hesitating because I don't want to lead the question here. Um, Here are my thoughts. So I might be a pilot, but that might not be my purpose, right? That might be just my occupation. Ideally, your occupation, your purpose totally align, but I think that's fairly rare. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I use that as an analogy. So, what I meant by that is once you have this true understanding of who you are, your actions will start flowing naturally
Right.
because of who you are. So, yes, being a pilot is a job, but it's more than that, because if you are like a pilot through and through, you live and breathe what you do. So it's not that you're working at a job. You are actually expressing your essence through what you're doing. And this is what I mean by living your purpose. So, yes, it will be represented as some jobs and occupation on the mundane plane. But essentially, you will be doing it because you wouldn't be able not to, because it's you. You are simply expressing yourself. And this is the key to it.
Got it. Well, thank you. I'm on that journey of understanding, and I enjoy connecting with folks like you who have spent, their whole entire life, learning and researching and educating and writing about all this stuff. I'm the student here, so I'm thrilled to be able to connect.